Hey, F50 women. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am with Gail Rudolph, and she is a best-selling author of a new book called Power Up, Power Down: How to Reclaim Control and Make Every Situation a Win-Win. And I can't wait to read this book because boy, do I want a win-win. She has spent years as an executive professional maneuvering the power dynamics that happen in all interpersonal interactions. One day she had an epiphany. Nobody takes your power. And I can't wait to hear how she got to that epiphany. She is the go-to expert on how to harness interpersonal power to create win-win outcomes. Gail's mission is to help those who often feel overlooked and underestimated. So welcome, Gail. Thank you so much for joining us on F50 Woman.
Thank you so much for having me. We're going to have a great time today.
I always start with just getting to know you, who you were as a younger woman, what you wanted to be. Let's see how this all started before you got that epiphany. So tell us about you.
Well, I actually grew up in the Midwest, and I was the youngest of 4 children. So my interaction and struggle with power started from when I was very, very young. And I always tell people that because it gives you a little idea about who I am, but also how this all came about. But I was the youngest of 4 children. My oldest brother was 18 years my senior.
Wow.
Can you imagine in my household being 18 years younger than my siblings that I never had a voice? I was never heard. I had to raise my voice. I had to throw a tantrum. I had to kind of act down, which was great when I was 2 years old.
Yes.
It worked wonderful, right?
Yes.
But fast forward growing up and you're trying to communicate with somebody and things get really frustrating. And the first thing you do is raise your voice because you learned it at such an early age.
Right.
So I grew up being a youngest child of 4. My father was a school superintendent. So education and learning and growing was always part of just our household.
Yeah.
And so that's really, where I started. I'm a Midwest girl at heart. I've lived on both, around the continent, or around the United States, I should say. And then I grew up and I went to work one day.
Okay.
And I started at a community foundation. And I had advanced the organization past our 3-year goals in just a little over a year. I was like, wow, I am on fire, especially since it was a new job for me and I was having to learn all the ins and outs of it.
Yeah.
So you have to understand first the dynamics of the organization. So it was a community foundation. We were a startup. The executive director was part-time. I was full-time. So let's translate that. Other women, right? That means I did the majority of the work. He got the majority of the credit.
Right. Yeah.
That's just the way it goes. But I had done these great things and I decided I was going to go ask him for a raise. I advanced us way beyond where we should be at that point.
Okay. This is a year in.
Pardon?
This was a year in, just a year in.
Just a year in, little over a year, about a year and like 12 months, 14 months, little bit more than a year.
Okay.
And that was talked about too, that once we reached our goals that we would, I'd get a promotion and a raise. So it was actually, we had talked about it ahead of time. So I went to him and I said, listen, bringing in more money than we thought. We're hitting our 3-year goals. I think it's time that we talk about a raise. He sat back in his chair at his desk, just kind of leaned back and he said, well, wait a minute, don't you get child support? And I was the single mom of 2 children at that point in time. I was like, what does getting child support from my ex-husband
Nothing to do with my work and my value?
Exactly. So I was dumbfounded. I brought it back to work. I approached him several more times, but ultimately I left the organization. And in subsequent roles, I was seeing this ebb and flow of power and energy, right? Because power is really energy. We feel it. When somebody's very powerful and walks in the room, we don't have to know who they are. We feel it. I was like, I'm not understanding this power. I was just really dealing with it. And finally, I was sitting in a meeting once and I realized, wait a minute, nobody takes our power away. We actually give it away by how we react and how we respond. It was out of that I started to develop a lot of techniques that would cause us to power up or power down.
Okay.
Because what I learned is that, power is really the capacity or the ability to direct or influence the behavior of others, right? Or maybe a course of events or outcomes. And this mysterious energy that kind of ebbs and flows was something we needed to be able to capture and harness.
Right.
So from that, I wrote Power Up, Power Down as kind of a guidebook, mostly for women and minorities, to be able to capture our power in every situation.
Okay. Now, is this book available now?
It is. It's available. So you can go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you get your books and grab it. We've just made the USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller list.
Okay. Nice.
And it's what I love is when I hear people, like women, especially, that talk about this and they say, wow, I didn't realize there were just little things I could do that make me powerful. Like I said, we can all grab our power right now. We don't have to wait till tomorrow or for somebody to give it to us. We have ways to do that right now.
These power techniques can work in any relationship. This is not just a professional model.
The book is geared towards a business, but these are things you can do with everything. I used these right before the book actually was released with my family. Okay. And all of a sudden we started to get along so much better, my brothers and sisters, because now we're grown, we're older, we're taking care of my aging mother. And we were butting heads. And I said, wait a minute, I'm going to use all these power tools. Well, now they laugh at me after reading the book and they're like, you used all of these on us. To get along great now. We get along absolutely great because I took the power struggle away.
And so these power techniques, are they verbal? Are they physical? Is it the way you use your tone of voice, or all of the above? Just to give us a little clue.
It is all of the above.
Okay.
So there are things that, we can do that change the way we sit, the way we approach things, our tone of voice. What I really like about the book is that by naming it Power Up, Power Down, it's about using that space and our ability to respond. Yeah. So what happens in women, and what I learned as a young child, is that we want to power up, right? We want to get dominance. Well, powering up is about remaining control in the situations that we have. Powering down, we sometimes look at as, oh my gosh, I don't want to power down. Yes. But powering down, from what I'm talking about, is about leveling the playing field so we eliminate power dynamics.
Right. Okay.
It doesn't mean you give your power away. It means you're choosing the right power tool to use in whatever situations you have.
Yes.
So when we think about Martin Luther King was not a power up person. He was not highly, dominant, forceful. He never wasted his time or energy trying to change people's mind in a powerful way by trying to force them, because the power I'm talking about is not about dominance, because nobody wins, but he leveled the playing field. He was powerful in a power down type of way.
Okay.
And when we talk about being powerful, what we're talking about is being able to show our power by how we sit, how we use our tone of voice, how we make eye contact, and not diminishing our ability to remain powerful in any and every situation.
So just off the cuff, can you think of, or can you share an incident where you have seen someone give their power away? Because I can imagine, especially as women in a professional setting, we maybe feel powerful at one moment, but then somebody comes in, our boss, somebody who's a little bit more aggressive or assertive, and we can lose it to them because of something we do or say. Have you ever noticed that happening?
I was doing executive coaching. I was working with a lot of women, and there was one girl that was trying to get a promotion. She had been at the organization for about 10 years, and her boss was giving her what we women sometimes get as that double thing. Well, you're competent, you're very good at what you're doing, and your team loves you, but I just don't think you're ready because I'm not sure that you'll be able to manage the team. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, that double kind of
you're great,
message.
but
you're great, but
in every way.
What I just complimented you on is the same thing I'm telling you why I can't give you the promotion. And you're sitting there going, I don't understand this. Yeah. So she actually came to me and she said, I need to work through this. I need to figure out how to handle this. So we worked on some things she could do, remaining powerful in her one-on-one meetings. Space is one I love. They take it from the animal kingdom, take up space. We as women tend to take up very little space. But what had happened is I had worked with her for a while, and they were having a meeting, an offsite meeting, dinner meeting. And it just so happened that she happened to be the only female with her boss in this room full of volunteers.
Right.
So they walk into this restaurant, and it's a long table, of course. And her boss inadvertently says, well, Kelly's here to take notes. Now, Kelly was not there to take notes. This was her project. So Kelly, at first, I mean, she wanted to she goes, I got so angry. I felt everything rise up in me, right? I could feel my face getting red. And then, Gail, I heard your voice in my head.
Yeah.
And she said, so I knew there was something I was supposed to do. So she says, I pushed that back down. And she said, I interrupted them. And I said, I am here to take notes because I'm putting together the strategic plan. So if I interrupt you, ask you to repeat or speak up, I just want you to know it's because I want to put the absolute best strategic plan together that I possibly can.
Wow.
She established her authority in that entire meeting and never had to confront her boss.
Yeah. Nice.
Now,
like that.
Surprisingly enough, she was called in the next day, and her boss said, I think it's about time we talk about promoting you.
Seriously?
She did all power moves in that meeting. She interrupted people in an appropriate way. She wasn't rude, but she's like, hey, I need you to repeat that. Where we as women, we wait, we don't usually interrupt people, but she knew that was a power move. She interrupted them. She asked people to speak up. She would get up sometimes because she couldn't hear and walk to the other end of the table because it was a longer table. There were about, 4 or 5 chairs on each side. And she'd walk so that she was standing up to take the notes. So she had the proximity of kind of towering over them, not in a bad way, but these subtle things that she did to make sure that she got the notes she needed. She established her authority as the expert creating the strategic plan.
Wow. I love that. I've never really seen it or heard it put in those words so succinctly in a way that we could clearly understand and act on. But I always felt about myself that the reason why throughout my career I wasn't promoted as I wanted to be is because I felt like I was showing up inauthentically. That's giving a mixed message. I don't trust you with control of my team because you're not showing up like you're in control of the team. I love it. I tell you, I have a couple people I need to get the book for. This is great.
No, go right ahead. Go ahead.
As you look back as you were a child, do you see any lessons as you were growing up as that younger sibling, 15 years apart from your next sibling? Do you see any of the discipline or anything that your parents did? But do you see anything that you were taught that may have affected your ability to be powerful?
Well, my parents were excellent, right? About telling me I could do what I wanted to. I could learn anything I wanted to.
Right.
But with older brothers and sisters, I got a lot of the things that come along with being the youngest, especially as 18 years older, because I grew up more with the grandkids than I did. I have a niece that's 5 years younger than I am. But what I had to learn was 2 things. I had to learn positive self-talk, that my biggest enemy was believing the negative things that were coming in my mind. And what I learned is you may not be able to stop those negative thoughts, but you can counteract them. We all have negative thoughts. So that was the one thing I learned. The other thing that I always say is, and I still struggle with this, I'm a recovering people pleaser. Being the youngest child, I was always trying to gain the attention or the approval of my older brothers. And what happened was I just started being people pleasing. So what I have had to learn over the years is to set up my boundaries, to set appropriate boundaries and to be clear with those. And my father taught me that lesson without realizing he taught me that lesson. Because when I look at my boundaries now, I think about him grooming our yard. He was meticulous about our yard and keeping it groomed. He would walk the yard to make sure there were no rocks in the yard because they could get caught in the lawnmower and, hurt somebody, break a window.
Yeah.
But when I think about my father grooming the yard, I think about that as my boundaries, right? My father knew exactly where our yard ended and our neighbors began.
Wow.
He never mowed any farther.
Yeah.
And we need to understand, where do we end? Because boundaries are simply limits we put around our time, energy, and money.
Yeah.
But where do we end there? And where is it somebody else's responsibility to take, right? And the world may not know. When people looked at our yards, they didn't know which was our yard and which was our neighbors.
Right.
But we knew.
Yeah.
And when I think about boundaries in that way, it helps me to actually hold true to my boundaries and communicate them better.
Okay. Wow. I like that you shared about the lawn and how that taught you boundaries, because we can learn lessons in not just telling one person about the boundaries and what boundaries are, but just experiences teach us how to be. But I love that, because you can learn from the way your parents mowed your lawn. And, who thought you would learn boundaries from your dad mowing your lawn? Anyway, I think it's great.
I think you can learn lessons in everything if you look for it.
Yes, I think you can learn lessons everywhere. And because we may be looking for a person to tell us something, that we may miss them. So look everywhere. There are lessons everywhere. So also looking back, if you look back throughout your life, do you see yourself practicing these techniques by accident, or do you clearly see when something happened, you were like, okay, yeah, that's why that didn't happen, because look at what I said, or look at what I did. Can you see that clearly now? You understand how this all works?
Oh, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So I would use them appropriately, but I didn't understand what I was doing. Okay. And then when I started to learn about them, I would sit back in rooms and watch how people interacted, and I would see what would work. And then when I started coaching people around them. And that's why I wrote the book as a guidebook. Okay. Now, if I go to the car dealership with a problem, right? And I had so much fun the other day. I had to go to the car dealership with an issue that was their mistake. And I had called ahead of time for like 2 weeks and couldn't get any answer. So I knew that they were going to pass the buck when I walked in. I decided I was going to walk in and only use the power up, power down techniques that I had in the book. Spreading out, making myself small, tone of voice, body language, the whole bit. So I took the guidebook that I had in the book. In fact, if you get the book, there's 2 pages that actually have the attributes of powering up, powering down. And I went back and forth. When they did something I liked, I powered down and leaned forward. When they did something I needed to have my power, I leaned back in my chair. I spread out. I set my purse so it took up more room. I mean, it was actually funny. By the time I left, not only did they give me what I wanted, the 2 gentlemen I was working with were my best friends. And the next day, the manager called me and said, my team had such a great time working with you. And I understand this could have been a real issue. So these techniques work. Yeah. They work. But now I can see, I'm like, okay, this is a situation that I need to decide what is, and I call them power tools on purpose, because women, we need to have our power tools on our power belt, right? To pull them out. Yes. And lowering your tone of voice, that low, soft tone. Yeah. That's a great way to get attention. Smiling. I did a white paper a few years back, and what it showed was that women are either considered competent or friendly when it comes to work, a lot of times everywhere, but very rarely both. Wow. So when we think about that, we want to think about, there are times we need to power up in the confidence, right? And they say, choose your words. Use more competent words. And there's sometimes we need to be more friendly and use more friendly words. Okay. Such a delicate and challenging balance, it seems. Maybe after I read the book, it'll make more sense. But you don't know if you're being too friendly, or if you're being too hard, being too intelligent, or being too dumb. I don't know. It feels like a delicate, challenging balance. And I'm not sure where I fall on the spectrum, but it'll be interesting. Actually, it's not as delicate and as hard as you think it is. Really? When you sit back, when you sit back, because you feel power. Yeah. So I talk about the difference between fear and intuition, because you feel power. When somebody's powering up over you, you feel it at your very core. Now, you may sit back and not know exactly what they're doing. You may not be able to say, oh, they're standing up, they're doing this, they're doing that, but you feel it.
Yeah.
Right? You feel it. So if you have power tools, you can actually choose to respond to that feeling. That's something you automatically sense and be able to respond back. So what I tell people is pick a couple of the power tools and practice them. Okay. Practice noticing what's happening with the energy that's going back and forth with power. And then say, okay, for a few days, I'm going to practice these 2 power up tools and these 2 power down tools. Yeah. And what it does is it tunes you into being more present in the situation and feeling like you can respond differently.
So you say there was one day when you had this epiphany. Was that what changed everything for you? Was it an interaction? Talk a little bit about that moment that changed everything.
For me, it was looking back. There were 2 epiphanies, to be honest, for me. I talk about one that was in my work. And that was when the day that I realized, when I thought back about that person at that community foundation, about the child support. And I was like, I may not have been able to change what he was saying or the outcome, but I could have left that organization feeling differently. Right. If I would have spread out, if I would have been eye contact, if I would have used my power and remained in my power, he may have never changed his mind, but I would have left the organization feeling not defeated, still being powerful, because this is about your own interpersonal power. Right. So that was the day at work that I really noticed. And it was actually in a meeting where I was in a board meeting and I was a consultant and I was watching this interaction happen at the board table. And there was a board member that said he was hosting and taking the male members of the team offsite for a retreat. And they were going to a really nice place. They were going to play golf. They were doing this. And then he made the statement. Now, first of all, I'm already getting ruffled by feathers, right? Because he says the male members. Yeah. And then he says, because I believe males are the real leaders. Well, then I was like, oh my gosh. So I started, because I was a consultant, I couldn't say a whole lot. So I started watching the room to see what was going to happen. Yeah. And I watched all the women, including the women board members, ruffle. They were upset, but nobody said a word. And I was like, okay, first of all, we're letting him get away with it, but most of all, we're giving our own power away. And then there was one board member that actually spoke up. And she said, well, that's great for the male members. What are we doing for the female members of the team? That's all she had to say. She didn't have to confront him. She didn't have to say anything else. And the next thing you knew, everybody was chiming in to see what they could do. He was totally, without embarrassing him, without confronting him, she had actually reclaimed the power and was doing in the room what everybody wished they were doing. Right. So that was like, just for me, it was like, that's the epiphany. That's something that I'm seeing and we're not doing.
And we're not doing it. Yes.
Yeah. Second.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I want to hear the second one.
I was just going to say the second epiphany came when I had an ex-husband that was he was actually probably diagnosed as a covert narcissist, but didn't know how to do it. And I remember one morning as he was throwing his fit and telling me things, that I sat there and I thought, I'm giving my power away. I'm just going to sit here in my power. I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to react. I'm not going to respond. And I think that so many times we feel powerless when we're not. We always have power with us at every given time. It may not change the other person, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about interpersonal power. It's about remaining powerful in who we are.
Yeah. Not giving up and giving in. Yes, I can feel that.
We think it's easier, but it's really not in the long run. It costs us way too much.
Yes, there you go. It costs everything. So does becoming powerful mean changing your personality?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, you're not changing anybody or anything you are. You are who you are, wonderfully made, who you need to be. You are perfectly designed in your personality and who you are. Yeah. What we talk about with power is just about remaining powerful in any and every situation.
Okay.
And think about it, even if you don't change the outcome of something, if you remain powerful in that situation, if you know which power tool to do, if you can feel good about how you responded,
Mm-hmm.
you are powerful.
Yeah.
It's about your interpersonal power. But when we raise our voice, we give our power away and we walk away not feeling good about it.
Yes. Now, did you have anyone, as you had these epiphanies, did you have anyone you went to help frame this? Did you have a mentor? Talk about those people who did help you along the way. Who were the ones you went to and said, hey, you know what? I'm having this issue. Help me out, if there was anyone.
I would go to all of my girlfriends and all of my professional people and talk to them about the situation. But I have to be honest. The reason I wrote this book is there was nobody there to help me along the way when it came to power. What we talked about was how to respond, how to do different things, how to behave, because we had a lot of things on how to behave in the corporate world that we think is the right way, or how to dress and various things. But what happened was that nobody was talking about this unseen energy that was happening in the room.
Yes.
And it was when I discovered that unseen energy that I started trying with people that I was working with different things and suggesting different things that they could do.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote the book as a guidebook,
Okay.
so that people could actually have it to be able to use, because I didn't have it.
Yeah. That's perfect. Now, you brought up you brought up how we dress. And I know for women in the workplace, that's always been an issue, probably still is an issue. Maybe it's not as much as it used to be. I don't know. But does how you dress affect your power as well from your experience?
Well, I grew up when you had to wear the suit with the men, and I worked in a male dominant.
Yes.
So I do think that there's something to be said about dressing for the position you want.
Right.
I think that there's something with that. But when you're talking about your power, what happens so much is I don't think people pay as much attention to us as we like to think they do.
Right.
I don't think I ever had a boss, unless I was dressed inappropriately. I don't think I ever had a boss that was really paying attention to how I dressed. I mean, unless I showed up completely inappropriate for the job I was doing. What happened to me is I was thinking about it. I was giving my power away to the point that I was thinking they were paying so much attention to me that had something to do. And I was focusing more on that instead of who I was, how I was behaving, how I was responding in meetings. And many times I think that we blame it on the way that we're dressed, or we blame it on something else when it may or may not be that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that we are killing our power or decreasing our power because of the way we're thinking about ourselves, because of the way we're thinking other people are thinking about us. And they're probably not even thinking about you.
I mean, we can go dressed perfect for the position, but if we stand in the corner and we're very small, and we don't speak up appropriately, we don't understand the dynamics and the energy as it's ebb and flowing around the room, and we don't step into our power, whether that's powering up or powering down, or knowing when to power up or power down, we won't get the position. Doesn't matter how we're dressed. And that's why I love this, because it's easy to learn. I tell women, don't wear shoes that clunk down the hallway. Don't show up in meetings with a bunch of bags.
Okay.
When you see a man come to a meeting, he comes with his notebook and a pen and his phone. Nothing else. We show up with 3 bags, our purse, everything else. Get there early, find a place for those things, right?
Right.
Show up at the meeting for how you want to be. There's so many little things like that that we need to pay attention to.
Okay. Anyway, we'll just keep rolling. So knowing all that you know now, having experienced all you experienced, what is the one piece of advice you would give your younger self if you met her today?
You have power. It's at your disposal. It's always there. It's always present. All you have to do is to tap into it.
Okay.
I wasted so much time giving my power away because I didn't realize I had it.
It was right under my nose and I didn't know it. So do you need to even fake it till you make it? So I'm thinking, some people don't have the inner confidence. Some people are shy. Some people are afraid. Do you need to fake it till you make it?
I have heard people talk about faking it till you make it. And
Yeah.
I think that there are some things, I mean, women tend to not take positions because they don't have every skill they need to take it, right?
Yeah.
So in that type of incidents, you need to be more like our male counterparts and take on positions that challenge us. And there may be a little bit of, I don't want to say fake it because I don't want people to not be authentic, but I think that we need to have more confidence in ourselves. And the interesting thing is when you harness your interpersonal power, you don't have to worry about whether you're faking it or you're not faking it. Your true authentic self, and what you're doing is you're managing and harnessing the power that's available to you at the time without, again, not powering up over anybody, because we're not talking about dominance or control or manipulation or any of
Right.
that. We're
Right.
talking about being powerful in who you are. Then I don't think you have to fake it. Then you can feel confident about who you are. And that's what I love about the power tools.
Yeah.
You can take one and just practice with taking up more space in the room, or making yourself smaller at the table. If you practice that, you'll start seeing a difference.
Yeah.
And then you can show up being your authentic self.
Right. Again, my questions leaving me.
I'm so
Oh my
sorry.
goodness. I promised to write them down, but I'm too busy listening. Nope. It'll come back to me after I keep talking to you. Okay. So tell us what's next for you. What's next on your plate? What's coming up? What are you looking forward to, or what you're getting into going forward?
The book was just released in October.
Yeah.
So I'm still promoting the book right now.
Okay.
And what I want to do, my goal in life is for every person to harness their interpersonal power. I don't want anybody to ever feel powerless or degraded or undervalued ever again. We can't control what other people do, but we can control how we respond. And what the magic that happens with power is when we control and understand how we respond and we harness this power, powering up and powering down, we actually feel empowered ourselves. And it doesn't matter about the outcome because we can walk away and feel good about who we are.
Right. Yes.
So my goal is to get this message out. It's never been talked about. Power is, something throughout history, people have misused power. They think it's dominance, force, and it's not. It's about creating win-win situations.
Oh.
That is what I want to actually, that's my goal, is to let everybody know they have power, how to harness that power, and how to use it appropriately.
Yeah. So with this, we can all be powerful. So I'm thinking as you were speaking, how we think there's not enough food to feed everybody on the planet. And so some people are hungry. Is there enough? Can we all be powerful, or does there always? Okay.
Absolutely. This is not something that's only for the rich or famous or anybody. Anybody can harness their power in any given point or time. A great example, you said you were a mother. Yeah. And how old are your children? Can I ask?
The oldest is 27 and the youngest is 17.
Okay, so they're pretty much grown, same as my children. Remember when your children were little and they didn't want to do something? And when they didn't want to do something, they would plop down on the floor, right? And they'd sit.
Yes.
Okay, right?
Yeah.
Or sometimes they'd throw a tantrum, correct? Yes. And if you tried to force them to do something, they would just push back. Yeah. It just created this horrible situation. It was not going to be good for anybody there.
Yeah.
But as a parent, if you go sit down next to them, you listen a little bit, you talk to them, you say, I'm not going to power over you. I'm not going to take you away or make you feel powerless. We're just going to find a solution here that's responsible for both of us. When you did that, what happens is your child a lot of times would get up and go do whatever you needed them to do. And you went on your day and the whole incident was forgot about. Yeah. You say, I see this. My sister works with Alzheimer's patients and I'd see this with them, right? They'd want to have their power. Well, that's what happens when people power up against us, we want to push back. We don't like people taking our power away. But what's interesting is it's when we're not trying to take somebody's power away or we're not letting them take our power away, win-win outcomes happen because we start listening to each other. Yeah. We start finding solutions that work for both of us.
Okay.
And I just love having visuals like that, because then you can kind of think about that. It's like, yeah, that is right. If I push back here, they're going to push back against me. So
Yeah.
you power down until you
Right.
get back to a level playing field, which is what you did with your child, right? You went and
Right.
sat on the floor, you listened, you powered down.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're less of an authority,
Yeah.
doesn't mean you gave your power away. It just meant you responded to them differently.
Yeah. Absolutely. And can this be taught to children? You just mentioned how we interact with the powering up, powering down with children, but can we teach this to them as they grow?
Absolutely. What's really interesting is I have a teacher, a special ed teacher, who is using, when I wrote the book, I never thought about it being used with children. I'll be honest. I thought it for women and minorities. I
Yeah.
have men that go, I love this book. I never,
Okay.
didn't, it's just fabulous. It's
Yeah.
helping me be a better person. But I have somebody who's using it in a special ed classroom. And they talk about, okay, is this where you need to power up? You're powering up, but maybe we should try to power down. And I don't know how that's going. It got sidetracked a little bit because of COVID and people aren't
Yeah.
in the classroom.
Yeah.
But as they're coming back into the classroom, she said she's going to be using a lot of the techniques of power up, power down with the students.
Nice. It seems like a technique that's just good for human interactions of all kinds. And so the book will be a tool, probably like you're experiencing, used widely in many different sectors. So that's great. So as we're winding down, let's get a little bit of advice from your playbook. So could you advise, of course, other than your book, which we will get and read, because we all need to learn how to power up and power down in relationships and marriage. I think this will be good for marriage. I think it's good for parenting, like you just said, and professional lives. Absolutely, especially as women. But give us another book, if you have one, that you advise all women to read.
Boundaries by Henry Cloud. Boundaries is a book that talks about how to handle boundaries. So I would say, I think women, we try to be all things to all people, and
Yes, we do.
we have a problem with holding our boundaries and saying no.
Why?
And
Why is that? It's so true. Sometimes I say to myself, Julia, wasn't that a boundary you just set? Why is somebody walking over that line right now?
that's why I have to picture the yard in my backyard. Picture something where you can hold your boundaries like that. I picture the yard. But I think that so many times as a child, right, when we're young, we're learned that no is a bad word.
Yeah.
And I think that somehow that gets translated to women, right? That continues to stick with us. And somewhere along our little boys, as they grow up, they pick up that it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we are so, we can multitask. We are watching out for the kids. We're watching out for our work. We're watching out for our spouse. We're watching out for our friends. And I think that a lot of times we get lost in that.
Yeah.
And learning how to say no is just one of those things that, again, it's limits we set around our time, our energy, and our money.
Yeah.
And if we're always running on empty, we have nothing to give away.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, how do these power tools work in marriage? Have you thought about that? I just, because women, men, and there's a dynamic, and, who's leading the household and who's in charge of what. We need to set boundaries even with the closest person we love in our life, which is our husband. And what do you think of that? I'm throwing that question at you.
Actually, that's what I love about this book. I'm a very simple person, right?
Okay.
So I didn't write a difficult book. I wrote a book that people could use, right? Because that's where I have to do it. But when we're talking about power, we're talking about what we hold inside of ourselves. In a healthy relationship, there's an ebb and flow of power, always. Okay. If in a friendship, there's an ebb and flow of power. It has nothing to do with the task that you're doing. It's that you're having this great exchange that comes back and forth. And it's when we're in that healthy type of setting that things flourish.
That's pretty cool. I think I'm probably having, because I just need to read the book, I'm probably having a challenge in letting go of the concept of power and control as being together, as being one. You think of power as somebody who's controlling everything and who's telling you what to do. And who has all the say. So I'm sure there's some listeners out there like me. You got to let that go and understand that power is empowering you within you, and it brings balance rather than lording over somebody.
Nobody wins when, I mean, we see it in our society, right? Look what's happening in our world. Look what we're seeing on the news. And that's about the wrong kind of power. That's about people trying to be dominant and control. That is not about the power we're having. We're talking about being powerful in who you are in any and every situation that you're in.
Yeah, because that kind of power means somebody has to be disempowered. But your power means everybody's lifted up and filled.
I think we confuse sometimes power with their behavior.
Yeah. Yes.
And
very much so.
I always look at people that are really doing that and taking that wrong use of power. It's probably more about them and their insecurity and the fact that they don't have their own interpersonal power, that they feel like they have to dominate over other people.
Yes, I believe that's true. Yeah. So what's one thing that you can't miss doing every day?
Oh, one thing that I can't miss doing every day is my quiet time.
Okay.
I actually spend some time every day thinking about, I'm a person of faith. So I spend some time there. I do some relaxation. I do some deep breathing. What I found is that if I don't take my quiet time, I can't be creative. I can't bring my best to the table.
Okay.
So it's one of those things that I don't compromise. And I wish I would have known that when my children were little.
Yeah.
I wish I would have not focused so much on how tired I was and got up more in the mornings when it was quiet.
Yes.
And said, this is me time, and taught my children that there was no interrupting that.
Yeah.
Because our minds are so filled with so much different things going on now. I mean, we have decisions and information being thrown at us. And it's kind of like, think about it as taking out the garbage, right? If you have your garbage can in your house and you're just putting things in it and things in it and things in it, and you never empty it.
Yeah.
But if you take the time to clear it, then you can actually, when you fill it, it's the things that need to be filled with the right things.
Yeah.
And that's what I think with our minds is when we take the time to clear it, then we can bring the right things back in and right focus.
Yeah, I agree. And so any of the listeners, if you're moms of young children, or if you're grandmas with young children, or if you're foster mom with young children, whoever you are, take that time, because you'll be a better mom, you'll be a better grandma, you'll be a better woman, and you'll take your garbage out and you won't have to stink up the house.
Right. And
very good analogy.
And it's a great time to think about your boundaries and what you will or will not do. Because if you think about them ahead of time, then you can respond to them easier
when they come up and they start getting crossed. Yes. Well, thank you so much for all of these insights. I implore the listeners to get the book, and it's just for every part of your life. And I know as women, we can let those boundaries go and we can give up that power, and we feel like we're doing some kind of righteous self-sacrifice, but really you're just not showing up for people the way you need to. Your children are watching you, your coworkers are watching you, and you have desires that you need to fulfill with taking back your power and empowering yourself. So thank you so much for being here, Gail.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
But before you leave, you have to tell everyone how they can get in touch with you after this podcast is over.
Okay, so you can go to my website, which is gailrudolph.com. And because there's many different spellings, I'm going to spell it for you. It's GAILRUDOLPH.com. You can sign up there for our GRC community. We send out a daily reflection, one email a week. They're all inspirational. The other place that you can do is you can find me on Facebook. I am just now starting to do some Facebook Lives. So you can look at Gail Rudolph Author, like our page, and you can join. There's a private group there. I'm doing a weekly teaching there on various things throughout the book, life, different things that you have happen. They're short, they're sweet, they're things you can walk away and take, because we don't have a lot of time. Right. So, but they can reach us there too. There's a lot of free information on both of those.
Good. Perfect. And that information will be in the show notes. The links will be there. So please just press on the link and check it out. And even if you just start on Facebook and get some information and learn how to do some of these techniques, or just be inspired, to not give up on yourself. So thank you again, Gail, for being here.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.